Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and the Orlando Jewish community for putting on this wonderful event, and my brother Daryl Davis and Scott Shepard here. Um, the most difficult part of the conversation for me is always talking about my past and where I came from. As the announcer, young lady had mentioned, I was involved with the National Socialist Movement for 27 years. That's was the largest Nazi party in the United States. For 25 of those years, I was the national leader. So unfortunately, I have a lot of insights to how people think in these type of organizations, why they make the decisions they make, why they got involved in that sort of thing. But to be clear on that, a lot of people will ask, or they have the assumption that these organizations are strictly that the people that get involved in it, that join these groups, are fit in a small box. That it must have been this. It must have been your parents taught you that. It must have been this reason. It must have been that you had trauma. Now, all those things can definitely be factors. My story is a little bit different. My grandfather fought in Hitler's army during World War II, during the Third Reich. My great uncles also fought. One of my uncles was one of the generals that was captured at Stalingrad. So as a young man growing up, as a kid, I looked up to my grandfather. He was like a heroic individual in my mind at the time. And I'm explaining this so people get a little bit of a picture of what that looks like, or what that looks like to a young man. So although my family did not promote hatred, they did not promote this type of ideology one bit, it was knowing that he fought in the Third Reich during World War II, that sent me on my journey down that rabbit hole, down that looking into these type of organizations and wanting to get involved. So the organization that I got involved in was something with historical ties, because I was always interested in history. So I joined this organization with the belief system that I was doing something good and noble. And I want to preface it by saying that obviously everybody in this room knows it's not good, it's not noble, it's not honorable. But when you're looking at somebody that's in one of these extremist organizations and you think, well, that person must have joined because they just hate everybody. They're just filled with hate. That's why they joined. There's something wrong with them. Hate is fostered in these type of organizations. It's definitely part of it. It definitely plays a factor, but it is not typically the reason why someone joins these groups. They join thinking that they're doing something good and noble. So, and the reason why I like to explain that, the reason why I think it's so important, is when you look at somebody in these organizations and you're saying, look at that evil SOB or that evil person that's involved in that. They didn't just become evil and get involved in that. Most of the time they thought they were doing something good and noble. So that's one of the first parts of the approach to breaking down that ideology and breaking down that line of thinking, is to be able to reach somebody where they're at. I'm sure we've all heard that slogan, to talk to somebody where they're at. I can tell you when I was running the NSM that when we went out and did protests, and we were just talking about this outside with one of the guys on security, the chief of security here, and we talked about how there was rallies and things like that locally. And I want to say, first of all, I've not been with the NSM for a few years now, but I want to apologize to the local community for the hate and the ideology that the NSM has spread in this area. And that's always one of the most difficult things when talking to audiences, is to reckon with that. And that is one of the reasons, and I know I can't speak for Scott, but I can speak for myself and a lot of the others that speak out. That is the reason why a lot of us, the few of us that do speak out, why we do that, is to be able to repair some of the damage done from our own past, to set things right. And a lot of people that are in these organizations, they think that they're on a mission. They think they're going to save the white race or whatever the cause is. They're going to do something good and noble. Of course, we all know it's not good and noble, and it's nothing like that. But that's what's in their mind. So to deprogram that, and we're going to talk about that today a little bit as well, Daryl Davis is one of the reasons that I was able to break free of that line of thinking after so many years. For 27 years, I traveled the country spewing racism, spewing hatred, recruiting people, every kind of recruiting you could imagine, from video games to music. I ran a record label, the largest of its kind in the country, that was producing music, hate rock music, and different types of music that were promoting this ideology. So as you can imagine, I have a lot of years to make up for the things that I had propagated out into the world. So to fast forward a little bit, because what I want to talk about is prevention and how not to get involved in these things. The first and foremost thing is, if anyone in this room, especially the young folks, if anyone is thinking about getting involved in an extremist organization, and I don't just mean a neo-Nazi group or a Klan group or something like that, any kind of extremist organization, the path in these extremist organizations leads two places. Typically, it's prison or death. I could not tell you, I couldn't even count how many people that I had known over the years that had either taken someone else's life, taken their own life, died, went to prison. It is a nonstop roller coaster ride of destruction, chaos, and death. It is not something you want to get involved in, any kind of extremism. So if you feel like you're getting pulled into that direction for any reason, please reach out to somebody like the individuals you're seeing here today, my organization called Beyond Barriers, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. We try to get people out of extremist organizations. We're very successful at it because we use our program called Relational Dialogue, and that has to do with talking to one another, listening to one another. And that brings me to the part where I met Mr. Daryl Davis. When I was running the National Socialist Movement, I was contacted by a TV producer that said, would you come and appear in this film? And this wasn't anything new. I'd done many times I'd done that, news, films, newspapers, you name it, all from all over the world. So it was nothing new. And they said, well, we're gonna have you come and meet this guy. And normally I would have done all kinds of background and research, but for whatever reason, on this particular time, I didn't do that. So I didn't even know who Daryl was really before I had met him. And we met, we talked, and just the story that Daryl just told up here today about when he was in the Boy Scouts, he told me that story as we're sitting across from each other in this restaurant. He told me that story, and right there, that was the first major seed. After all those years involved in that organization, that was the first major seed that anybody had planted that helped alter and reshape my life. I owe an incredible debt of gratitude to this man that I could never repay under any circumstances because of how he was able to approach and talk. And this is something you can do with people that you disagree with in your families, in school, in society in general. Here we have a society right now where even Republicans and Democrats won't talk to each other. Everybody in this room, I guarantee, knows somebody that says, I won't talk to him or her because he or she voted for Donald Trump or he or she voted for Joe Biden. That's not the American way, and that's how these type of things get started. You can end up in a very extreme organization like what I was involved in or what Scott Shepard was involved in if you stop having these conversations and you stop listening to one another. When Daryl told me that story, that life experience about how he was affected as a child by racism and hate, that affected me in a way that like getting kicked in the chest by a horse. It didn't feel right. When you're sitting across from another human being that's telling you, this is how something like that affected me. In my mind, I instantly went to my own family, to my own children, and I thought to myself, what if someone had done that to one of my children? How would I have reacted? I'm not even going to say out loud how I would have reacted because it would have been probably with violence. That type of thing. So someone that was leading the Nazi party, filled with hate and animosity and all that, is sitting across from a black man who's telling a life experience, a story about how he was affected by racism and hate. And that bothered me deeply. Now, I didn't let him know that it bothered me deeply at the time. Obviously, he knows now and has known since I've been out of the movement. But inside, that first seed was planted, and it happened through dialogue, through that conversation, through empathy, being able to rehumanize the dehumanizer. I was dehumanizing. I dehumanized so many people for so many years. But I thought I was doing something good and noble. It took someone like Daryl Davis to be able to help me see the person that I was, and that ideology that I stood for caused him as a child to feel that way. Not long after that, I met a Muslim filmmaker by the name of Dia Khan. The film, if anybody has seen it, maybe I get a show of hands. Has anybody here, well, first of all, has anyone seen Daryl's film, Accidental Courtesy? Show of hands, please. Awesome, just a couple. How about Dia Khan's film, White Right Meeting the Enemy? No. So, two films that you all should check out if you get a chance. In White Right Meeting the Enemy, when I met Dia Khan, the filmmaker, she had a similar approach where I got to know her over the course of the filming because I was one of the main characters in that film. And she sat across from me towards the end of the filming process, the weeks that we had been filming, and she said, she was talking about how racism made her feel as a child. Once again, just like Daryl's story about how it affected him as a child. And she said that she felt less than, ugly, not accepted, not wanted, that's how it made her feel. I could see the pain in her face. I could feel it like a vibe or an energy in the air. I could feel it. I could feel her pain. I could see it in her face. That was the beginning of the end for me, because now all of a sudden it's not this noble, honorable ideal that I was going to fight for my people. Now I'm seeing the second individual in just a short period of time that I actually would sit down and speak with, how that's affected them. And if it affected Daryl that way, if it affected Dia that way, how many other hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people across the planet have been affected in this way by hate and racism? And I know the question on that is, well, couldn't you have figured that out before? I wish I did. Believe me, I wish I did. But when you're involved and you're embroiled in these type of organizations, you don't think about that. You don't think about how others feel. All you think about is what's behind those barriers that you've set up, that you've placed. Those barriers, that echo chamber, that bubble you surrounded yourself with. When you go into these organizations, it is very cult-like. I know when I was involved, different girls that I was dating, one after another, they said, Jeff, this is like a cult. You're involved in a cult, and you're like the cult leader. And I got so angry at the time. I said, man, what is wrong with every girl just about every girl I'm dating? What is wrong with them? And I really believed that there was something wrong with them, that they all thought this way, that so many of them thought that way. The problem was with me. I couldn't see it. I couldn't self-reflect. I was so embroiled in it that I couldn't see that, like a cult. It is very, very cult-like. Nobody that's involved in it would say that it's a cult or would admit it or even believe it. But when you analyze it and you break it all down, it is so cult-like, and that is the mentality. So fostering those conversations, and I don't know where I'm at as far as time goes, so I'm going to pass it over to Scott here, and then we'll do question and answer. But there's just so many ways that you can reach people, and that not to give up on people. If people like us, after all those years, had the ability to change, and I'm not making excuses for it because there is no excuse. I'm just trying to explain how it happens and how we can reach others, how we can bring them out for the greater good of all of humanity, not for them. One of the critiques that I had when I first got out of the movement and I started speaking out, I heard somebody say, and I really had to think about this, but someone said, you know what? I don't like Jeff Scoop. I don't like what he's doing. All he's trying to do is save his old Nazi buddies and get them out of the movement. He's just trying to save them. It's just another way of doing what he did before because he's just trying to save them from that life. And I thought, I am trying to save those people. I'm trying to put them on a straight path and get them out of that life. But for me, that's not really the motivation. The motivation is if we off-ramp, if Beyond Barriers or another organization, if we off-ramp the next mass shooter, the next synagogue shooter, the next mosque shooter, the next terrorist bomber, and I'm not naming these people because they don't deserve to be named. They're not martyrs like the movement says they are. But if we can off-ramp that person, how many innocent lives are we saving as a whole? That's what matters to me. Getting that Nazi or that white supremacist out is just bonus points. The key is to save humanity, to do something noble and truly honorable that is going to save people, that brings Americans together. I love this country. I know we all love this country. We have to work together. We have to come together. And just one quick anecdote, and I don't want to talk too much over my time here, but it was put to me like this by a friend, another colleague that I work with. She said, Jav, what do you think if you, like the movement thinks of like a field of flowers, and you said like a field of sunflowers, every single one is exactly the same. That's how the movement thinks, right? They want everybody to be the same, basically to be compliant and be all the same. Would you rather look at that field of sunflowers and go, well, that's nice? Or would you rather look at a field full of different wildflowers that are so different and so beautiful, and you put the pictures right next to them and you see all these colors over here, and then you just see yellow over here. Well, yellow's nice too, but that wildflowers and that's the diversity. That's America. That's what we have here, is people from all different cultures, all different environments, all different races, all different religions coming together. Just because you get along with somebody or don't get along with somebody or don't agree with what they say doesn't mean that you should cut them off, or doesn't mean that you should try to silence them. You can still disagree with somebody, even vehemently disagree with somebody, and still see their humanity. Once you start not seeing the humanity in the other or start othering people, that's exactly what we did in the movement. We othered people. We dehumanized them. So try not, I know it's difficult, but try not to do that to other people, because that's the road it leads you down, is to something like what we were involved in. My friend.